Tom Chilton, Game Director.
I'm Jay, I'm the Production Director.
And I'm Brian, PvP Designer.
So this is totally informal, totally your time. It's just total Q&A, however you guys want to spend it. So just getting all the stuff. Wow, Red Shirt Guy already has his hand up. That's awesome.
I ask actually before we start, I'm not sure, will this be an opportunity to ask lore questions for the interview?
The question is this an opportunity to ask lore questions? Not from the 3 people up here. We would embarrass ourselves so
If
badly.
you want really snippy,
Sargeras.
silly answers.
Yes, we will make things up.
Also, if you're back there, you're going to have to yell the question, otherwise I won't be able to hear it.
Sorry, Red Shirt Guy. Red Shirt Guy, what's your real name? Ian. Sorry, Ian. Hi.
Hi. One thing that I noticed wasn't addressed too much in the presentation was talking about item scaling that you introduced, and I haven't been down the demo of the game yet. From what I heard from some people that played on the demo,
It's
item scaling is already in place. I was wondering if you can just go into a little more detail on what you've done and how it's going to carry forward.
Yeah, what we've done is a lot of what we talked about in the past in terms of, we had all those exponential power jumps at the end of each expansion with each raid tier. And, today, obviously, those aren't important or necessary. Welcome, Greg.
Hey, buddy.
So what you're seeing on the floor is exactly that. The items are squished, the stats are squished. The item levels remain the same because we felt very strongly that that's how players identify how good their item is, right? If they logged in on, patch day and saw that their item was suddenly level, 122, they would freak out, right? Like, oh my God, they nerfed me. So, we're trying to make sure that players understand that, okay, yeah, this item is relatively, in terms of relative power, the same as before.
So the numbers crunch is on the back end. It's not necessarily really visible unless people are actually looking at, say, recount or something like that.
Exactly. And even then, the percentage damage that you'll deal to a creature is the same as it was before, or at least really close to it. So I think that it's the kind of thing that, depending on the player, what we found on the team as the team plays through it is that some players adapt to it immediately, don't even notice the difference. Other players takes about 30 to 45 minutes because they're really, the numbers were ingrained in their head. But after about 30 to 45 minutes, they're past it, and the new numbers are the new numbers. And it's really nice because in the long run, what we found is that, it's funny because I bounce back and forth between playing at the office with the squish numbers and then playing on live without the squish numbers, and that can mess with your head a bit. But it's really not that hard. And you get to the point where you're like, man, I wish these numbers were squished. You see these giant numbers on live, and they're just very unwieldy.
Just a really quick follow-up. So am I guessing one reason why you guys didn't really push talking about the item scaling in the presentation is because you want this transition to be relatively as subtle as possible so that it's not made as big a deal.
Really, it's just that we're doing it tomorrow because we only had an hour and a half this morning.
Yep. It's in that presentation tomorrow. So.
Greg got a picture. You're not going to be able to see this. Someone handed him a picture that says Gregory Street on it.
Little Rock, Arkansas.
I gotta be surprised that there's not a lot of those.
Yeah. So one of the things is since Cataclysm, when we got like a lot of guild achievements and guild up, you didn't really see much additional things added in this year.
Yep.
What's coming for guilds in
Right. We don't currently plan to add more guild levels or perks with this expansion. We think that system did the job that it was intended to do for Cataclysm, but I don't think that we can reasonably expand every single system we ever do with every expansion. In fact, what we're trying to do is, as we go forward, is find ways to compartmentalize the systems to the expansions that they live in. So in the same way that, when you go to Draenor and you do your Draenor thing, you aren't going to be expecting to fly back to Pandaria to work on your farm, right? And we think it's important that we can add things to the game that can kind of get phased out or not necessarily phased out, but not necessarily have to continue to build on. Otherwise, the game just gets too complicated and too cumbersome, and the time it takes for us to make an expansion will just keep going up also. So unless we have some killer idea for, oh my God, we need to do this with guild leveling, we have these perks that we just have to find a way to give you, or whatever it is, then I don't know that we would continue to do that. So.
Is there any ideas to expand upon, making guilds that more important, make people feel like they want to be part of a guild? I mean, with LFR, a lot of people sometimes it's so, whereas before people wanted, they said, like, I need to be in the guild, I need to be in the guild of raids and dungeons. Now it's kind of like, I don't necessarily need to be, so it's... Yeah,
I mean, we say, while it's easy to say that, the reality is that pretty much everyone is in a guild, right? And the guild system was never really designed to make people want to be in a guild, because people already wanted to be in the guilds and people were already in the guilds. It was more about allowing the game to recognize the accomplishments that guilds were doing. So, that still remains true today. And we don't feel like, I mean, gosh, if you level in a character if you log in a character that isn't part of a guild, it takes all of like 3 minutes before you get some invite, right? Like, X guild that's level 25 wants you to join, and it's like, okay. Sometimes I join just for the fun of it to see what these guys are saying, but they're actually like legit guilds that are just, trying to get more people. So I don't think we have to do a whole lot to get people in guilds. It's really just more of a question of trying to, I do agree with the problem of like, it's important for us to make sure that players want to play with their friends and with their guild mates, and that's really what a lot of why we created the flex mode, and as we'll be talking about tomorrow, I believe, we're talking about some other improvements that we're making to try to make sure that you're incentivized to play with your friends rather than always just hitting random because it's easier and more convenient.
Give them a preview. Give them a preview.
Okay, so, Greg, do you want to give a preview?
Sure, can we get the slides on this? We used to have this thing called the raid browser. It's still in the game, it's very hard to find now, which was like I post a group and you look for it and get in there. And we want to expand that idea.
Works like a champ.
Yeah, it doesn't. We'd like to be able to support anything from like, I want a group to go kill world bosses, or I want a group to go do achievements, or I want to complete my Shadowmourne, or anything like that. And let people just, cross-realm browse to those lists and say like, oh, I'll join this group, or I won't join this group. We just think particularly with Flex Mode, with all the other features like that, we really want to encourage people to do these pickup groups over the random matchmaking. We'll always support the random matchmaking. We kind of want that to be the last resort when you can't find other people. Your friends aren't online, you're in between friends, whatever. We don't think the game will work as well if it's a game where everyone goes in and solo matchmakes all the time.
How is loot going to work since Flex and Normal are kind of being combined into one? Is it going to be personal loot still, or something different?
So we have a new loot model that's going to work mostly like the master looter does today, except that it will scale the number of drops based on the number of eligible people in the group. So if you have 10 people, it'll drop fewer loot than if you had 20 people, but it actually counts people who have killed the boss that week. So you can't just like stuff people into your raid in order to funnel all the loot to one guy to gear them up quickly.
We thought of that.
Yes.
Essentially then a piece of cloth can be used by a mage or a warlock, they can distribute it however they want.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the big flaws with Flex today is in order to get it in, we had to use the LFR loot model, which was all personal loot, but we understand a big part of the social experience of going into a raid together is like, hey, I'll pass on that, it's a better upgrade for you, or I really like you, so I'm just gonna let you take this awesome trinket. If you still want to use the personal loot, it'll still be there, you'll just have to opt into it.
Particularly in the case of Flex where you're, by definition, it's your friends, right? It's not just randoms like LFR.
Is there any concern of people, of groups like min-maxing those breakpoints on where how many pieces drop, that sort of thing?
Greg promised that, I'll make sure of that.
The idea there is that it's pretty behind the scenes, but as you get more people, you're still getting a higher chance to get a third piece of loot, right? Until you hit that break point where you're guaranteed to get third piece of loot, you still have an increasing chance of that happening. So statistically, your chances of loot will be the same whether or not you have 13 people or 15 people or 18 or whatever.
Is there a specific goal for how many races will have loot drift models at launch? Because I appreciate you said that they all be in launch with somebody coming
Yeah, we actually haven't decided that. We're exploring what is it going to look like for us to wait until they're all done. We're exploring what would it be like to kind of dribble them out as they get completed. We haven't really decided. After Blizzcon, we'll probably listen to some of your opinions as to what you think we should do, and then think about what is maybe the right way.
The logo's always great.
Awesome.
Did you see the art panel? We showed a lot at the art panel.
The gnome female expressions are amazing in the art panel.
Ian.
I have, now that Dave's here, I have a lore question. One thing I've been wondering, but I didn't get to ask the lore panel since I thought the other one would be neat. This one is more related to Warlords of Draenor. One thing I was thinking about with going back to Draenor, in Burning Crusade, it was kind of odd how all of a sudden we go and we see Garrosh and Joran and Sorfang's son Granosh, and we think there's never been any mention of these guys, of Grommash and Barra and Kilrog ever having been in a relationship. So does that mean we're going to meet Garrosh and Theral's others? Are they going to be here?
Orcs come from eggs and the stork. So.
Garrosh's mother is dead by this point, but we might get to explore a little more the family dynamic there. Most of Thrall's family is alive when he gets there, so that's kind of a cool hook. Who else did we ask about? Garrosh.
There was also Joran and I and Granosh Sorfang.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we'll have the Sour Fangs or not. We haven't really decided. One thing we talk about a lot is we want to make sure we have enough space to focus on the characters that we want to focus on. If we throw every character that was ever a Draenor at you, you don't get to spend a lot of time with them, and it just sort of becomes noise, especially if you're not like a big fan of the lore. You don't really know these names, and it gets a little crazy. So we're really going to try and focus as much as possible on sort of the core characters that really evolve through the story. So we won't get everybody in, but I think we should have a lot of great sort of story moments there.
Via link here. I'm really excited what you guys are doing with it. Is that going to be cross servers? Any more elaboration on that?
It should work pretty much exactly the way the pets do today. So it should be cross-server, cross-realm. There may be a couple of restrictions, Horde versus Alliance, like there are with mounts, but otherwise the intent is that if once you earn it, you're good.
Okay. Is the old outline plan to be unchanged for level?
Correct.
Old outline will be unchanged.
Yeah. You will probably access it a different way than going through the Dark Portal, since the Dark Portal will take you to Draenor.
Yeah, if you think about it right now, the timeline is currently broken. Ever since we did Cataclysm, right? If you were leveling up a character today, you're playing in the Cataclysm timeline from level 1 to 60. Then you go back in time, kind of, to Outland, and then to Lich King, and then back to the current timeline for the rest of Cataclysm. So that's already kind of a jumbled mess. So one of the things that we're thinking about doing is making it so the way that you access the Outland is conceptually through the Caverns of Time, because it's already sort of in this kind of broken timeline.
The Draenor and Outland are different continents. Unlike the way once we redid Dark Shore for Cataclysm, Old Dark Shore is no longer accessible. Hellfire will still be there if you want to go kill Boar.
Thank you.
So to you guys, the account system for this expansion doesn't really look like it changed all that much.
I know, right? Amazing.
For once.
Hooray, us!
So we were going to say you guys were actually really happy with the way the account was set up, or not. Is this, from now on, is this kind of the direction you guys want to take this system?
For the foreseeable future, yeah. I think ultimately, I think we're a lot happier about how much actual choice it feels like you have. Granted, there's still some talent tiers for certain specs that feel like, that one's the best. And that's something that we've been trying to address over time. But we think it's a pretty big step forward in terms of how much real choice you have as a player and in terms of what you like versus what you don't like.
This is perhaps something that you guys will bring up tomorrow in the panel, but another thing that hadn't brought up today, scenarios. I was wondering if, is there anything you can talk about in regards to scenarios that as far as improvements or changes with the system, or are you pretty much satisfied with what you've established in this?
Yeah, we're pretty satisfied with what the system is, and we plan to have scenarios in 6.0. We don't know exactly what they're going to be yet. We have some ideas, but we still plan to have them, and I'm pretty happy with the way heroic scenarios worked out in terms of like the grouping with people stuff like that.
And just a real quick follow-up that I can think of since I'm taking rating and such, Valor Points, Justice Points, are they going to be consolidated to one currency, seeing as you don't, with the item upgrade system working how it does in 5.4, it doesn't seem like there would be a need to have two separate currencies for that kind of progression.
Hopefully.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say.
We've talked about just having Valor and just having Conquest. Justice didn't do a whole lot for us in Mist of Pandaria, which kind of illustrates that maybe it isn't necessary if, as long as you can get some kind of catch-up gear, and we haven't decided yet if we're going to keep the Valor upgrade system like we have today.
With the story going forward, you guys talked a little bit about the timeline. Are we going to be thusly affect, like is it going to be an alternate universe where when we go back in time, it's going to affect what we currently know as Azeroth? Or does that timeline go off onto its own path and we create our own?
Pretty much the former.
Yeah. The easiest way to think about it is when Garrosh goes back, he kind of spins off his own timeline, and that's all craziness going on over there. And he's going to try and come through back to our world. We're going to stop him, but it's not going to change our history or anything that happened previous for us. So we get to have the cool adventure back there, and not really worry about the timey-wimey stuff.
And then also,
That's a technical term, timey-wimey.
just on the topic of PvP, with the player housing being able to be random plots around the area, and it looks like they're going to be fairly large plots around the world. You guys talked about phasing. Are you at all worried about world PvP ramifications where randomly people will be phasing in and out in a little PvP encounter because someone's PvPing by their own plot? Now players are getting confused at why that person disappeared. It's going to be happening all over the place.
Yeah, that can happen, kind of like it does, if you're PvPing near the farm or anything like that. That's not, it's not as big of a land area as you're imagining, in that, like, there's a chunk of land in several different zones that you get to pick from. But, ultimately the odds of you PvPing, in the world right by one of those boundaries is pretty slim. So I think it'll be pretty rare that happens. And then, of course, we're creating the World PvP zone that a lot of people that want to do World PvP will be in anyways, and that's kind of far away from any of that sort of stuff. So it's possible that it could be a bigger problem than what we would anticipate, but I don't think it will be.
So I think to clarify, I mean, it's not like you can pick any random spot in Draenor. There are actually specific spots where you put your garrison. The way you phrased the question, it made it sound like you could just decide, Tom's plot is there and my plot is there. That's not how it is.
There are only certain locations in each of the different zones where you can place your garrison.
So you'll know if you're kind of in that area.
Yeah.
When you think of like Half Hill Market, there's, that's an area where people are doing other things, and that's why, silly PvP and then phasing happens. I can't really imagine a layout where there's things right outside your garrison that like everybody's gonna be congregating right outside your garrison. I don't know if that's our plan, but it doesn't seem like it would be.
You guys talked about, and I'm sure that many people here are very happy to hear you guys did, the ability to advance the character to level 90. Is there any thoughts or discussion about allowing that, or more than just that character, by a store or something like that?
Yeah, so you're the first person to ask this, but if you think about it, if you bought another license and then bought an expansion and then paid character transferred yourself, your character that you got as boosted up to level 90 back to your main account, then you kind of did that. That seems kind of janky. So we've talked about it. I don't know what we're gonna do, but there would be that possibility already, and that doesn't really feel like a great experience.
I have 5 characters that love to do this.
Is the goal to make that like an upsell transaction type thing, or purchasable after the fact?
Maybe.
In terms of phasing, in regards to the garrison, how is like we spoke this morning, how is showing friends your garrison, what's it going to be just specific to a party?
Right. So the idea right now is that the party leader, in a lot of the same way that a party leader can do a ready check, you can invite your party to your garrison, and then they can say yes or no, and if they say yes, then instead of seeing their own garrison, they see yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
About Garrisons, with that invite system, will the invited people be able to make use of how you customized your Garrison in a particular way, or is it just specifically for the cosmetic, this is how I have my account set up, so they just...
Yeah, it's mostly just so that other people can see what you've done with your garrison. I mean, we'll give you reasons to go and visit other people's garrisons, mostly because we think the players really want to be able to show it off, right? And say, check out my base, I set it up like this, and I've got these buildings, I'm the best.
So with possibly going down, sounds like to one just without noise, and obviously dailies and time style, are you looking at doing some sort of red run or to unlock some catch up here or early here to get to integrating on top of heavy dungeons, or are you looking at just starting out with a time style type thing where hey, we'll kill a bunch of areas and build?
Maybe I will successfully answer your question, but I guess if you think about our endgame philosophy and kind of where we're going with that, I think what you can expect to see for the endgame world content would be sort of a fusion of the 5.1 style of storyline with the Timeless Isle style of kind of free-form exploration and gameplay. So if you think about the Timeless Isle, but with more of a backbone of the 5.1 type of storyline, where over using the reputation system, you're able to progress the storyline. I think that's what you can expect to see for 6.0 endgame content. Now, whether or not that, how exactly those item levels work with relation to dungeon item levels and stuff like that is still a little bit TBD in terms of, which one's better than the other, or are they the same? We're not exactly sure yet. That'll take, just play testing for us to determine what the right slot is.
So have you guys decided you're going to do the number crunch?
Yeah, essentially the item squish is in until it's out. So, we have it in there and we'll keep it in there unless, and we expect it to go live with the game unless something happens that compels us to remove it.
I saw that Flex isn't going to be there anymore. It's an easier version under normal. So that tier that I think is comparable to Lich King 10-man.
Yeah.
What's that niche, is that still going to be around?
We just really wanted to rename it. It felt weird that normal wasn't our basic difficulty. So if you run Flex today, you probably want to run normal in 6.0. That difficulty should be about the same.
Right. And if you're running normal today, you'll probably be running heroic in 6.0. And if you're running heroic in 6.0 or in 5.0 today, you'll probably run mythic in 6.0. I'm sorry, is the what going to be better?
Yeah, so obviously if you're saying that for the hardest levels, are you kind of status graphic or anything?
A lot like we do today, right, where you have the special texture color, stuff like that. Not currently planned. I would love to be able to differentiate them more, to really associate more prestige with being able to do the mythic difficulty stuff. It's really just a question of time and how long it takes us to make armor sets and how much we can push it.
Aside from being able to craft from the bank and mentioning the possible changes in stack sizes, are there any other crafting changes coming from professions?
We want to integrate the garrison a lot with professions. We don't exactly know what that means yet. We have some plans that hopefully will pan out there. We've also talked about working on the recipe UI part of professions is part of the UI that's in desperate need of an overhaul. So if we can get all those other UI done, that's kind of next on the list there. We also, again, time permitting, we were able to do a lot of cool catch-up mechanics, particularly for things like cooking and archaeology and Mist. We'd love to do that for all the professions so that when someone decides, I don't want to be an alchemist anymore, I want to be an engineer, it's not look on the website for what kind of copper you need from vanilla. That whole system feels super outdated.
Speaking of crafting limitations, currently characters are limited to 2 primary professions, and the idea of followers helps that a lot. Followers able to help. Now, is there going to be a limitation on how many followers can have a profession that one character can benefit from, or are we going to get full
have a limited number of buildings you can build in your garrison, and if you want to be the blacksmith dude, you have to dedicate one of your plots as a blacksmith. So in that way, if you want to, and again, this is all TBD because we don't actually have it working yet. If you want to have lots of professions, you're going to have a lot of profession buildings, but then you're not going to have other potentially cool buildings as a result. And we don't exactly know how powerful someone with tons of profession buildings will be compared to a player with tons of profession alts will be. That's the kind of thing we'll just have to see how it feels.
Do you have any plans for class-related epic questline, like the Refine quest we had for Warlords, or something of legendaries, maybe?
So we're definitely going to do a legendary quest line again, and we got a lot of great feedback from the legendary line in Pandaria. Class quests, they can be pretty resource intensive if we want to make them really cool. Certainly the Green Fire one was, obviously there was a lot put into that quest. Yeah, we love those, but it's very hard to kind of fit them into the schedule to do them right. So I wouldn't be surprised if we can squeeze in one or two. I'd be really happy if we can get a little more just to make your class feel extra cool. But legendary definitely, and we're looking at ways to make the legendary quest feel a little more custom to your particular play style, so that you can get a little bit more of the flavor of your class in the legendary progression. That's step one, and hopefully we can do some more stuff, but we'll have to see, time permitting.
This feels like a good shaman expansion. Of course, I said that about Cataclysm too, but.
This is probably going to be answered with soon TM, because it's about timeline for release. I guess the best way to raise my question.
Tomorrow.
Right. Okay, great. You got Blizzard.
You'd be sad though, because you'd be at BlizzCon.
Blizzard now is going to have 5 franchises in development with Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm. You have a Diablo 3 expansion coming out. Who knows when StarCraft 2, Legacy of the Void's happening. But the point being, in the coming months, we're going to have multiple franchises coming out with releases. Does this play a factor at all into your forecast? And I know you probably can't reveal that, but is that going to have any impact on the release of Warlords of Draenor?
So we have, each one of the teams is sort of a separate entity, right? So the people here are completely 100% dedicated to World of Warcraft. The Hearthstone team is completely dedicated to Hearthstone and on down the line.
Business perspective, though,
I see.
think you don't want to have like 2 releases necessarily competing at the same time, because you have like, if Reaper of Souls were theoretically to come out
Sure.
within a month of the Warcraft expansion, you'd be concerned that people will be all playing Diablo instead.
This is one of those concerns that we worry about, and you maybe worry about, that really never actually really becomes an issue. Diablo came out when Diablo came out, and Mists of Pandaria came out, and they felt like they were about the right of distance apart. Did we engineer that? Not one bit. We would maybe like to be in a situation where we actually have to make those kind of decisions,
It's a
but
good problem to have. Too many games.
so far we release so few. Traditionally, we've released so few games, and now it's like, oh my God, we have 3 games that might come out next year. I say we'll jump off that bridge when we get there. We haven't ever got there yet.
So just to piggyback on that, if you guys feel like Warlords of Draenor is going to get extended out, because you just feel it's not ready, right? That leads Siege of Warlords obviously as the last great content, and I could potentially make it look almost like an ICC where it's dragging out for almost a year together.
It could be like every other expansion.
Oh noes, Tom, what will we do?
Wait, do you have any plans on like potential in between patch or like a world patch?
So the awesome thing about that is, if you're concerned about delaying Warlords of Draenor, the thing that you can do to absolutely guarantee we delay Warlords of Draenor is to put another patch in. Like, there's nothing more that's going to delay Warlords of Draenor more than us doing a 5.5, right, or some kind of big patch.
Really,
like that.
if 5.5 took 4 months for us to make it, it would delay the expansion by 4 months, and it doesn't really end up helping.
So I understand the concern, and we have that concern big time.
Right.
It's a really hard problem to solve, because there is a one-to-one relationship between
At this
how much
point
time
in
we
the
give.
project, everybody on the team is working on Warlords of Draenor. And so any content that we want to do is taking people away from working on Warlords of Draenor to work on that content. That's not as much the case early in the expansion cycle. So you know, when you think about patch 5.1, and yeah, the quest designers did a lot of work on the, you know, Operation Shield Wall, Dominance Offensive, that kind of stuff. But they didn't really have any zones for Warlords of Draenor to work in yet. So it wasn't actually costing us time on Warlords of Draenor for them to work on that content. But later on in the expansion cycle, it absolutely does. And that's why we've tended to see these big gaps. Someday we'd like to solve that. We'd really like to solve that by increasing our capacity to the point where we can create, you know, parallel content, where we can have a full team working on Warlords of Draenor while also having people to spare working on other things. So hopefully, one day.
So, when this came out, right before we did the 1 year pass, where, you know, it kind of, you know, this might be asking a lot too much, I'm not sure if you guys want to.
That's fine.
But, is there any plans at all, you know, it's something similar, you know, you got, obviously you have an education out here, and you have, you know, a Diablo's going to come out. Is there anything in the marketing side that you're doing something similar to what you guys did when you were trying to pull people in and move them on?
Was this like an annual?
Are you talking about WoW Annual Pass? Oh, got it. Yeah, we're not talking about doing another WoW Annual Pass. We talk about it every now and then, and I think WoW Annual Pass we feel like it was a good idea, right? It was like this reward for players who were going to stick with World of Warcraft, and you got Diablo for free, and if we have an awesome idea like that, then we would consider doing it, but I don't think we think that the Diablo expansion is that awesome idea. Not that the Diablo expansion is not awesome, it's just, that's not the idea.
Not quite the same as a completely new game.
Yeah, that you've been waiting 10 years for.
Because if you weren't the person that got into Diablo 3 to start with anyways, and it's really totally not for you, or if you didn't feel like you finished Diablo 3, the first one, so.
Yeah, it's easy to have free to play, so.
Yes.
The gameplay section on the stream just showed someone riding the Fey Dragon mount. Do you guys have the idea where that comes from now?
What's a Fey Dragon?
The Fairy Dragon.
What's a Fairy Dragon? No, I'm kidding. Do we want to talk about that?
Sure.
Do it.
I don't care. Leak. You. That's your call to make.
This is an exclusive. It's not really necessarily that exciting, but we actually are going to release the next pay mount, and it is the Fairy Dragon. At the same time, it's going to come with, we're going to release the charity pet. The charity that we're going to do this year is Make-A-Wish, and there's a charity pet that comes with it, and we're also going to do a combo pack that'll have the Fey Dragon plus the charity pet at one low price.
You know what the charity pet will be?
I do.
Will you tell us?
I will not.
I'm wondering, how do you guys think the community, and how do you guys feel like the past cycle before Blizzcon during went with the raid and the story patches out?
Yeah, we call those like small, big, right? We did small batch and big patch. I like the idea. I like the idea of getting more content faster. You know, if I had a magic wand, I think we would say, let's patch every month and have something. Like, that doesn't mean that each thing is the same size, but it means that each thing would be, you know, there'd be something.
Raid a month would be a little overwhelming.
18 bosses. So that would be my dream. It's really hard to do that, but we made some progress in this Mists of Pandaria cycle, and we'd like to continue that.
Awesome.
With the last two expansions, we've had a 5-level cap jump. This one's going from 90 to 100. What led to that decision this time?
It would just feel so weak to get to 95.
That is the answer. That is absolutely the answer. It's like 10 is better than 5 in this case, and 95 just feels weird.
Another thing that went into it is previously we always felt like we had to give players new abilities every time they gained a level or they wouldn't feel more awesome. And so that in some way was also driving, well, we don't want to give people too many levels because that means we have to give them 5 new abilities, and you know, classes don't really need 5 new abilities. So this time we just unencumbered ourselves from that whole thing. We're like, screw it, you're gonna gain 10 levels and no new abilities, and you'll probably be pretty happy with that answer.
We do have a system that we'll be talking about tomorrow, is it? Okay, about how we're going to give you some rewards between 90 and 100 to make sure that each level feels exciting to gain, but it's not going to come with the baggage of like, oh God, I've got to fit 10 more buttons on my bar.
This is a very mathy answer for those very mathy people out there, and it's not what drove the decision, but one of the nice things about going 10 levels is it doesn't hit your combat rating so much every time you gain a level. It kind of sucks to go from 71 to 72 and your crit rate suddenly plummets. We don't have to hit those nearly as hard when we have 10 levels to go through. So getting each level should feel a little more awesome and not like, oh.
So when you're leveling through mock right now, you're, of course, with that 33% nerf on your leveling speed, but then are we going to see a significant drop between the levels between 90 and 100 in terms of like how fast the levels?
Yes, and very deliberately. So our philosophy for leveling up through Warlords of Draenor is that it's just going to be a fun romp through the zones, a fun, fast-paced romp. You know, we're kind of backing off the idea that it should really feel like, you know, oh God, you really ground through 700 quests in order to get your 5 levels or whatever. You know, that worked for us back in, you know, Burning Crusade and to some extent with Lich King, but we don't feel like that's where kind of players, we don't want players to view 10 levels as like this big burden to overcome to get back to the kind of content they want.
Hold on. There's people in the back that can't see.
Totally lost my question. Do you have a guild ideas for the garrison as well to share, or maybe like a guild hall or something common that the guild can use?
Not at first. That could be something that we do in the future. Certainly it's something that comes up all the time, but we feel like we have to take it one step at a time. I think we'd be encumbering the system with too much right off the bat to try to accomplish that at the same time as all the stuff that it's already trying to do.
2 questions to go. Make them good.
We have orcs and Draenor with new lore getting fleshed out, learning about the orcs past and more about the Draenor when they weren't running like crazy, at least initially. Are there any other Alliance or Horde races that'll get a spotlight during the expansion?
Let's see. I know we talked a little bit about this at the lore panel earlier. Entire armies aren't coming through the portal, so we kind of are picking and choosing interesting things to talk about. We'll get the Blood Elves will get a little bit of an interesting story hit with their paladins, kind of trying to redeem themselves, and we have some great Dark Iron stuff. We're going to kind of continue what we were, the story we were telling about Moira and the Dark Iron and trying to integrate the dwarves together and really stepping up to help the Alliance. So we've got some great Dark Iron dwarf characters that are going to be in some of the zones. Yeah, and sort of the non-player races we can really explore as well. So Arakoa, what were they like when they had wings? We get to find out. They were jerks. And ogres, what's nice, we haven't really done a whole lot with ogres in the game. They've been big, dumb, me smash, you die guys. Those were the sort of wreckage of the ogre culture that came through the portal with the original games. We actually get to see what the ogres were like, and they actually had an empire. They actually had sorcerer kings that were kind of some badasses running this huge sort of ornate slave empire. And we get to kind of help take that apart. It's an empire in decline at this part in Draenei's history, and so you can sort of see that, like the fall of the Roman Empire sort of thing with ogres, so that'll be kind of fun to explore too. So, yeah.
We have a technical name for these ogres. We call them fancy ogres.
Fancy ogres.
Toga ogres.
Togers is
Last question.
Make it a good one.
And the Sabrones.
She was first.
Sabrones.
Okay, so with all of the UI overhaul that's been happening, is there, like pets and mounts and all of that, are there any plans to overhaul the achievement UI to where we can like search for achievements or, because how it works now, you always see like just with the rating, but there's no further way of filtering it or anything like that. Is that going to be something?
That would definitely be cool. We don't currently have it on the schedule for 6.0, so we'll see. Maybe sometime in the future. We've got a ton of stuff that we're already trying to do.
There's this guy named J. Allen Brack who has a pet feature with achievement compare, where I want, like, when you link your awesome achievement to into the guild or your lame achievement, I click on it, and then we kind of see, like, you have this, I have this, and that's been on the list for a while. That's something we want to do too.
Just a search feature would go
We want a
so
search
far.
feature as well, so yeah. Thank you, fans. Really appreciate your time. Let's go enjoy the costume contest.